tonight he's going to speak to us about bringing Destreza methods from original treatises into modern day practical art. And we'll just take a moment and I will mute and we can unmute Alberto. And if you're ready, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Okay. Well, I'll try to make, not to make it too boring. Okay, and then also I wouldn't mind having people asking questions in the chat and then try to answer them as much as I can. Well, basically, to start, I would like to explain a little bit the way I approach Destreza, but also historical fencing as a whole. Because, to me, Destreza has always been the method I follow to actually practice historical fencing, not trying to do something separated from other traditions. I don't see that there are differences in practical terms with, I mean, in fencing, it just, you take the sword and you fence. You may follow one method or another, but the important thing is actually that you fence well. So what I have always find appealing is developing practical methods that are that are good. So you personally fence well. You are a good martial artist, and you teach people to do it well. It's not trying to do what is written in the treatise, because this is only the way they explain it to me, well, to us all. But the idea is use that to actually being able to be good myself, and then to teach other people to be good with the sword. So this approach actually comes from my sport fencing background. I mean, when I started, I practiced Oriental martial arts when I was a kid, and then I skipped into Olympic fencing in my youth, and I was much better as a fencer than studying karate. I mean, I was not bad, but I was better with the sword, and I competed at national level, and I normally trained with the Spanish Olympic fencing team. My masters were all from the Olympic fencing team, and then so this actually, it was very important for me, because even though I was relatively good, I mean, I was classified among the best 30 fencers in Spain, and my higher rank ever was the 13th. It was higher than my real one. I think I got used to normally lose. I mean, when you fence at such a level, you never win, because you always have the Olympic fencing team in front of you, defeating you when you get to the last part of the competition. So obviously, if there was large competitions with 200 people, well, obviously 170, 180 were not much for me, but when you get to the finals, they always lose. So I was used to lose when competitions were really, really serious. In medium level competitions, I normally won many of them, as many as, I don't know how many, but I realized that it was not really the higher level. So it was always, this is something that I brought, I mean, why I say this, not because when I skipped into historical fencing, I had no interest in competition anymore. So the first years when I started, we were 7 people in Spain, the first one, and then I wanted to focus my study more on the historical part. So my competitive time was over, and then now I wanted to do something different. And for many times, I didn't have any contact with competition anymore. That came slowly. When I started, it was in the 1999, and it was very, very long time ago. There was nobody. There were few people in the United States were Arma, with John Clements, and then in Europe, I met Andrea Lupo Sinclair, and Ramon Martinez as well, that I met in Italy. But there was almost anything. So I was a sport fencer. I traveled. I was still active as a sport fencer when I went to Italy and met Andrea Lupo Sinclair, in his school, FISAS, and I met Ramon Martinez there. And but there was a sport fencer. I defeated everyone because I was an athlete. I was fencing, and the level was very low. But I mean, very low in terms of hitting the other, not doing something historical. I mean, not treating the sword with respect, like in a duel. I mean, just hitting and not being hit. It's a game, yeah. So you play the game better than the others because you are used to it. And this was the at the moment I didn't have any interest in competition anymore, and slowly in the 2000 competition came back. I will speak about that a bit later because the problem is that the way we see things, I mean, the way I saw things, and then it's something relatively easy when you are completely on your own. When many more people start practicing, not in Spain and in Europe and all over the world, in the States, obviously the perception and the approaches to fencing are very different. There are many different ways to actually approach it, and you realize that you are not completely on your own. Thing is that you can't impose on others the way you see things. You have to start to blend what you do with what the others do, because fencing in the end is not completely realistic. There are many approaches because you don't kill the other or you are not killed by the other. If it was a duel, it would be much easier. Only one would survive, and so. But fencing is not like that. It's an art. So the way you approach fencing, it will influence the way you perform, the way you actually fence, and what as well. I don't like the word, but as a product, something you expose to society, to the real world, it will be different depending on how you approach it, how you understand it, and then how you perform, because of the ideas you have decided to be the basic things on which you will support all your practical approach. It's being simple, it's complicated. If someone has read the book I wrote, I mean, it's a very simple book and didn't pretend to be not anything exceptional. It just, but one of the ideas actually lying there is just like, is that, I mean, is that you take a particular method. In my case, is Destreza because it's my country's method, but it could be also another one. And then you understand the concepts, and then you use them to explain what you do. So you can explain when we do any kind of actions with a sword, you can explain it in Iberian terms with Destreza. We say, well, you use the right angle and then you make a tajo and then you thrust, or you can do it just following any Italian tradition. There are more than one. Basically, it's all the same, but the Italian one, but there are differences between the authors because it's not unified like the Spanish, because what we do is not that different. I mean, between us, still using the same swords and trying to hit the other without being hit. In the end, you can't do things that are completely different one from the other, because in the end, the idea is not to be hit and hit the other. So changes come more because of your physical attitude, prowess, body mechanics, the way you neuromuscular coordination. So what you think, how you transform what you think into practical actions, than the theoretical method, than the descriptions. Better than that, the techniques and descriptions that we have in the treatises. So you read a treatise, you try to make the technique into something practical, and when you do that, as it doesn't come out from anything, you have to put it there through movement. It will be different because we are all different persons with different mindsets, with different body mechanics, with different strength, different training, different. And so you can't control that. So that was a little bit coming. Well, I will take it back now. When I was coming from sport fencing, all that sport fencing background was there. So what I know how to hit the other because I feel it. Just something it's inside me. It's not in that, but it's not only me. All strong fencers that have a long practical experience have that inside them. So they will bring it out. They will bring it out when they fence. They will do it differently, obviously, because some use longer distances, some shorter ones, some change rhythm, some use shorter steps, and some longer ones because they have stronger legs or weaker legs. You adapt to your physical conditions.
Alberto.
This is something. Yeah.
So
Hello.
it sounds to me like you're making a Destreza argument about changing practice. If the inputs to the causes change, then the practice must also change.
Yeah. Exactly.
Can you comment on that a little more?
Yeah, of course. But that's. I mean, the bringing. Bringing historical methods into practical systems. One of the things is that those methods were actually developed for a very particular context, and even among them, those contexts change in time. That is why often the authors in any tradition criticize other authors, saying that they are mistaken and they are doing things that they don't work. Actually, they never met. They're just criticizing because the way they approach fencing is different than the author they are actually criticizing. So this is something that for us it will happen even more because it's 400 years normally difference. If we start in the 17th century, 300, 400 years of time. How do you say time? I lost the word. Okay, but do you understand me? I mean, the 400 years has passed since these methods were developed. So when you bring it now into a practical method here, a practical system here, it's much different. I mean, we use masks as sneakers. So we don't understand. I mean, the personal values of bravery, courage, or but not only that. That's very simple. I mean, also the relationships among them, between the what's happening, okay, between the person that related to the author. We don't know it. I mean, when you I normally research a lot the 17th century Destreza, also from the historical point of view to understand. And you realize that there are many things that make more sense when you know that the marquis of something was protecting the other guy who was trying to demonstrate that because he has personal interests, as we have nowadays, to achieve a personal success in the court, Pacheco de Narvaez or Etenhard in the late 17th century. So, and this is going to affect the way they fence. I mean, because they are human beings. We are not talking about duels now. It's just fencing. So, what I mean is that you have to know the context to actually trying to reproduce what they are doing nowadays. And but this is a bit what you were saying. I mean, this means you have to define the objective of what we do. I mean, the underlying idea here is that okay, why we want to to why we want to recreate, why we want to know how they fenced. What is the reason beyond that? I mean, why should we fence like they did it? I mean, or if we want to do that, why? But we want to do that in what context? In the context of a duel, we can't. That's impossible because it's a duel. It's violence. I mean, it's about merely killing the other. So the mindset is completely different. And if for someone that has competed, it's pretty clear because um, probably many of you has competed sometimes. I mean, if you compete at a certain level, it's very aggressive. So you want to win at any cost. Otherwise, you don't get there. So and so you hit. As I mean, sport fencing is safe, but you are very aggressive when you fence. So it's very technical. You control your aggressivity to win, but and normally when he attacks, you attack. You don't care that much. It's also because of the rules, but sometimes you don't care too much about getting hit. You care about hitting because you want to score the point. So in a duel, okay, you don't want to die, but it's impossible to reproduce how you feel when you are in the middle of a fight with a sword. So so you have that. I mean, because it's emotional, and you can reproduce emotions. You should hate the other. You don't know. It's something I have never lived that, so I don't pretend to recreate that. I can learn to actually handle properly a sword, to be skillful when using it, understanding distance and timing, knowing what to do, and then if the moment comes, we will see how I behave. But I train for a duel I will never have. Okay, so it's okay. But I'm from this point of view, as this has limitations, eventually we go either towards the art or either towards the sport. Then trying to keep it, to blend it, to keep it, it's what I personally suggest, but it's a personal choice. Every fencer should choose the approach he finds more interesting and appealing for him. I think that having a larger, a wider approach, it's better because as a fencer you experience more things. I mean, fencing is something emotion, and then so it's one of the reasons I don't. Some people has often told me I am very dogmatic, but I'm not at all. I mean, just like I dogmatism comes when you try to do exactly what is written in the treatise, because it's you don't really understand what I mean. We can use treatise to actually understand and get ideas and then develop them into practical methods. So, and it will be good or bad depending on how good or bad we make it. And then so actually practical experience, it's necessary because it's what you have to actually put it into practical method. So if the more this the most the higher your skills, the better you can put all the knowledge you get from treatises into a practical method. But I mean, what I always try to do is actually feel what they were. I mean, if you take, for example, Ettenhard didn't give a damn about reconstructing Pacheco's method. He didn't care. He was a good fencer himself in his time. He was 50 years after the death of Pacheco, probably 70 years since his prime. So it's a very long time afterwards. And then, if you have read Ettenhard completely, you see that at the end of the treatise there is a strong discussion between the Maestro Mayor, Juan Carlos de Montenegro, and Ettenhard. Juan Carlos de Montenegro wants to stick very strictly to the treatise, but we don't know what he did. We will never know because he didn't write anything. And then if he would have done it anyway, we wouldn't know either because we have not we have never seen Ettenhard in action. There are some things in the treatise that gives you insight. I mean, when he says that you can't parry a cat, and then Hetten has said that to parry a cat, you have to use another cat. So this is actually telling you something about distance and timing, about the action. It's a jest, but still we are imagining things because we don't know how the swords, how exactly were the swords Hetten had used, and how much different they were from that used in the time of Pacheco, because obviously when we look at Pacheco, well, you know, we have some drawings in one treatise, but he was active as a fencing teacher for 30 years, for 40 years. So swords change in time. And we didn't have any single replica of the swords used in Spain or in Italy. I saw in Leeds some years ago a sword that they say that it's 17th century practice rapier, but it's not true. I mean, that was the 19th century. I've seen many swords. That was a 17th century reproduction, not in a 17th century one. So there are very few, very few. And so all we have are descriptions. So what I mean is that there is a lot of imagination there. So when we bring it into our practical methods, depend a lot on the swords we use and how we put it into how we use it. I normally tend to use relatively heavy rapiers, so they don't look heavy when I wield them because it looks like I wield them with fluently, but they are heavy, and I prefer heavier rapiers because they control better the central line. But it's true that you need a strong arm and a lot of practice, and not everyone can use the heavy rapiers. Recently, I had an injury 2 years ago, and as I'm getting older, I'm now using lighter blades because of the injury in the arm, and so my fencing has changed. Not because I like it; it's because I'm not using heavier rapiers because I teach every day. My arm is getting older, and so I have to readapt not to break myself. So I'm changing my fencing because of my physical limitations, because of my age. The 7, 8 years ago, I didn't have any problem in my arm, so I could use very heavy rapiers very quickly. So the fencing was different. So I can see myself how I've changed the way I fence. And there are videos in YouTube when I was fencing with the Deltin blades, you know, that were in use in the 2004, something like 2005. Now they are very light, very long weapons. They break easily. So then, and that led to actually engaging and disengaging all the time, and it was very different to use atajos properly, because with a shorter blade you get to the atajo always in a stronger way because it's shorter. So you lose distance, but you have more power in the atajo. So you say, well, what's the problem? That's not a problem. You have to adapt to the blade. So if you try to do rada with a longer blade and thinner, very light thin blade, or with a heavier one, will change. So you will not exactly do rada. You will do what you do. It's your stuff. So and your stuff can be very good, average, bad, depending on how you work, how you train, your personal skills, and the amount of training you have in your commitment, a lot of things. So this is basically how I approach it. Why? That demands you to be humble. You know, humble. I'm very humble with myself because I know my limits. So I like very much fencing. It's my passion. So I dedicated everything to it. So just like so I left my job because I wanted to teach fencing, and because I really like it. I thought I could do something with that, and I want to do it as well as I can. I mean, so, and I always train. I always research with my body and with the weapons to understand better. Now it's mainly, I mean, my glory days as a fencer has gone because you know, being 55 years old, it's not a good age. It's better to be 40 or 35, you know, when I was in my prime. But I have knowledge, so I can teach others, and I still a great fencer. But you know, now it's time that all that all the knowledge I have achieved in through these years, you know, bring it. I try to put it you know, to put it in different. I mean, you know, writing books, teaching in the school, and then try to explain it, to actually teach people to fence well. In the end, my true aim in the end is just like I like very much the Destreza, but I understand that the old method. I mean, the old methods are great to actually travel with your mind, but you will never convince anyone if you don't win. You have to you have to be you have to prove in practical, you know, in practical terms that you can overcome anyone. I mean, with the method, not because your personal skill, which will be necessary to prove it, but because the method is good. So in many, and so that is why I have always chosen, uh, when making practical decisions, I've always chosen to adapt to what I see it's happening in the assault. That's why also I have fenced with as many people as I have been able to in you know, traveling in Italy, in UK, in France, in Austria, in all places I have been, and I still do it. But mainly now it's not. I mean, not winning is not because I want to win medals. That was in the past, but because it's I want to understand. So, and you know, facing different type of adversaries, different approaches, it will give you insights on what you have to do, and then how to bring your practical solutions into the science. You know, into a method you can teach to others. I don't know if this is
Alberto,
a bit confusing.
a question.
Yeah.
So I read the book, and I think people might think, reading the book, that you say maybe it's impossible to work on historical technique, but I don't think you really think that. And maybe it's impossible to know exactly what they did, but you study both the sport and the art. Can you talk about how you work on um, historical technique? Because in the book, you say that you also do that.
Yeah. What now recently, because of the model development now, if in you know, in Spain competition is not very popular. I mean, while Europeans are in other countries, in Italy, it's very they are very focused on sport. In Spain, they are we are not as focused on sport. Even though I try to to tell those who like it to actually try it, because it's, I think it will be a good experience for them. It will take years, but it will be a good experience. But okay, but I normally separate now the you know, the training in uh, three different parts. You have the sport, okay, then you have the martial art, which is the modern martial art. I mean, I was telling about just like putting all the knowledge you get from your own physical training, from your skills, from what your body tells you, the body mechanics, body mechanical information you get, and then your training and your skill, and then and the treatise into that, but using the treatise to get ideas, but don't try to stick closely to the treatise, but just you use the treatise as an it's a mean, not an end in itself. And then if you want to go for the, you know, the historical research, trying to be more strict and more true to the descriptions, then I was suggesting it, telling it before, and I call it now fencing in context. So I mean, I study the context, so and then and explain it. Basically, I mean, it's not something really complex. It's just like okay, you have when you read about destreza in the 17th century in Spain, you see that it was basically an art. Um, Pacheco sustained that it was for self-defense, but I mean there was not any proof that it was ever used in a duel. Obviously, there were many duels, and I'm also studying that here, through documents, but there are no any records on that. Duel, it's a duel, so you don't know. So you see, well, how did they practice in the 17th century? Okay, we take all the information you get from different treatises. From Godinho, you also have information, because and this will put in. I mean, you have to put together all the information for the vulgar, because the vulgar method it's not really vulgar. It's predestreza. It's the old method. Okay, and then you say, well, okay, they didn't use sneakers. They didn't use masks. They didn't want to hurt themselves because they they, they that was badly seen. And then if you hit the other, you have to pay him. So there are some documents showing that if you hit the other and you injure him, you have to pay the doctor or something to repay him. So they don't want to hurt themselves. Okay, this then starts making sense. You can actually fence with the arm extended and get into the mean of proportion the way it is described. So you try, then this is what we are doing now. Normally, I have in the school, I have every month, I have 1 week is dedicated to working with the historical approach. So I have them all, even free fencing, sparring, and everything must be made thinking you are a 17th century Spanish gentleman fencing in the Sal, and then normally I say the 1620 now. So just like go back and then and it's great fun. There are people who really likes it. The arm gets much more. I mean, it's much more tiring for the arm because you don't move with the strength you use normally in the modern day martial art. And because when we fence, you can't hit the other in the face. And when you hit him in the chest, you must hit with control, obviously, because you are a gentleman hitting another gentleman. So you must have there is a courtesy, which is actually it's not described, but is mentioned. I mean, probably you have read it when Pere de Mendoza, uh, Pere de Mendoza claimed to work. Wanted to work as a master for the prince. Was the first. The name is Baltasar Carlos. The Prince Baltasar Carlos, the first son of Philip IV. There was a challenge in El Retiro, and then 17 different fences of the best fences in Madrid actually fenced against Pérez de Mendoza because he wanted to prove his skills to get the position as a fencing master, and he achieved it. And then when in the record, it is said that that some of the fences attacked him with less courtesy that the occasion demanded. Okay, they were swinging around the blade. This is pretty obvious. I mean, they were not. Why? Because they were not using masks, so they were fencing with courtesy. Also, Thibault says that. Ulysse Thibault says, "Well, you can cut here, but you don't cut to the head because no, you need courtesy. So you can't cut to the head. You can't deliver cuts like that. You have to control them." Okay, so this is a different fencing. So I do it also now because I want to research that part, and I have my students doing it, and it's much more demanding for the arm. But it's also true that after a while they want to fence normally, it is modern day martial art. It's a modern day approach. We jump and we duck and then we dodge outside, and the way you fence, you can't limit that. I mean, if you have higher skills, you move less because you use more the blade and you handle distance better because you have more experience. But if he doesn't have experience, you can't forbid him to actually use his body to perform better as long as he moves swiftly, correctly. So this is that is a bit what I mean. I think it's more or less understood. It just we have competition is one thing. Then you have a modern day method, which is masks, sneakers, and no, you don't need to actually stand with the arm extended. No, I don't ask you that. I want you to fence well. Then if we go to historical approach, then we use, we stick closer to the description, but with the limitations that we should that they had. But otherwise, it's useless and absurd. I mean, if somebody extends the arm, when you see him, the mean of proportion is very close. So it's very close. If you stand, you don't have time to react. Then you need to spread your legs. So if you spread your legs, you get the mean of proportion with the blade, but obviously using positions that allows better movement. You say, unless you take off the mask. You take off the mask, and then it starts making sense because you are afraid of the. His practical experience is proving this. I mean, some weeks ago, just before being confined at home, I was fencing with my student, and while we were fencing in the context, I mean, in the 17th century, in 1620, but he didn't change his mindset. So he wanted to hit me at any cost. But I was fencing, I was getting into the mean of proportion and then using atajos and flaquezas and everything. And he tried to avoid the blade. I hit him in the face. He said, well, you lost an eye. You just like that. And he said, well, you're right. I was trying to hit. He forgot because we're still using the mask. We know it. So it's difficult sometimes to be so honest that to think to fence as we were not using it. Eventually, in training, experienced fencers, I think you should take off the mask and then fence like they did it with the blunts, obviously. But if you read Pacheco in Grandeza said you should not use any blunt. So you should you use cut and thrust sword with no blunt, no mask. So obviously, this changes the way you fence. This changes and his descriptions are made for this approach, not the approach I normally do, with the mask. We all do with the masks, sneakers, and sometimes lighter blades. No, so this is if somebody tries to do exactly what is written, then another one fences freely the way he feels with a lighter blade, and he has a real advantage because he's adapting to the modern day context while you are not doing it. You are trying to fence as if you were in the 17th century, but you are not. So either all of us assume that, or doesn't make real sense because there's no understanding, which is we can't actually understand why. But I think it's an approach I try to spread now because it's just like I think it would be if said it's not very difficult. I mean, it's just assuming that you are not using mask, that you're not using that you can hit the other in the face and you cannot hit hard, and it's about the art of fencing. Then everything makes more sense. Actually, doing this historical approach in context, and normally the flaquezas that never actually really work in the modern day method actually work very well. I mean, I normally use them very often during the assaults because they can naturally, because they are so close in standing that they make sense. But um, probably, I mean, I assume that all of people here have some in a certain moment read the flaquezas. But for example, the most basic one, the one Vietnam is very popular in the States because it has been translated, and he always speaks about the línea en cruz en flaqueza bajo la fuerza, and this actually comes very very often because it's the moment you are in the contest, you don't hit him directly. When you bind, the other disengages. And normally, when we fence in the modern day method, well, it means this is not me doing it. I have seen it everywhere. Just like when you try to do the first linear cruz, there is no clear distinction with the atajo. So what happens? The other one never disengages, but the other one is going to make movimiento de disminución, and will change the degrees and get control of the blade. And I mean, why? Because it's better to do that. I mean, this is what I do when I fence. You try to do that, and I will make movimiento de disminución, and I'll try to hit you probably with a direct thrust if you don't have the blade in a good position. Why? Because it works almost always. I mean, so you don't do the linear growth anymore because it's so weak that you don't do it. Why doing it? Yeah, because you work in the context. You are honest enough, and your partner as well. Then you work honestly. It will come out. It will come because it's obviously you need to have a good control of the blade and because the it's true that the Destreza demands certain order, and so if the position of the shoulders is not good, the arm will get tired very soon. But this is something that can be worked through training, and I find it fascinating and very appealing from the researching point of view. But it's not something that I would not do only that, because only only the historical approach. It's I mean it's how do you say in English? I mean you have to be you have to control yourself that much that it's not fun. I mean because you can hit him. So and when you have the mask and you can use timing and speed, and then you counter-attack in speed, you have very beautiful hits, and then letting all your spirit flow, and then so you understand timing and fencing, you concentrate, and then protection makes fencing easier, safer, and more fun. So I don't want to choose. I mean, it's the one thing. I find it interesting from the researching point of view, but the other one, I find it that it's more fun, and it also demands more physical activity, which is also something I like being a sport fencer.
So I think you have formed a good argument for how you work with historical fencing. Some of the listeners have asked how you take the historical material into competitive fencing that you do.
No, I don't. Into competition, I don't take it at all. I mean, it's just like the historic. I mean, yeah, researching should be split in two, in my opinion. It's just like you have research, practical research, which what we are talking now about doing the research and trying. So you study the context to actually do an historical research in practical terms to understand. This is something. I mean, continuing what I was saying, I find it interesting because I try to. I have always tried to make not only the strength, I mean, historical fencing as an activity, to give historical fencing a place in the real world. And then that's also why I like it, but I collaborate with academical institutions. So the direct at university, the everybody has disappeared. The hello?
We can hear you.
Okay. Then the at the university, I mean, I don't know how to say it, the directors, of the Faculty of Modern History, and then I have very good relationship with them. And then also recently I was during Congress on medieval history. It's a very small world, and some people they don't like historical fencing, but others really support it. and they called me to help them in conferences, lectures, to actually make, to promote history. And next month there is an online congress. It was going to be a congress in Ponferrada, but now not Spain, and now it will be online. And they called me to actually participate. Me and Oscar Torres as well. We will be both of us, giving a lecture. And then what I mean is that we should actually separate. You have the academic research. Academic research, we can actually collaborate if you have a good historical research. It means not only reading treatises, it means reading, knowing the context very well. I mean, knowing a lot about the era we are studying, but also about the more common day, the way they live, so you can understand in better how they thought, and even bring that into your own research, and so to help academic research, which is sometimes very cold because you just go through the papers, but they don't understand the characters. When we go through treatises and all this, I think if we do it seriously, you can convince them. I mean, and they see that they can get something from you. And so I think for me, it's important to give historical fencing, some importance. I mean, at least locally, I mean, at national level, with working with universities. So we have the practical research and then the research documents. It's not only treatises, it's much more than that. It's about the characters and everything. Then, can we put all this research into competition? No, obviously, because competition is something much more emotional. So it's about physical training. So it's about being able to stand when you are losing, adapting to the rules, having understanding tactics. So, and this comes to experience. So you don't normally. One of the reasons why I like competition and I like students to actually compete is that you learn how to compete. I mean, to use tactics. You know what you have to do and in a certain moment. This is something very emotional. I mean, when I was young and I competed, many times I was out because nothing. I mean, but when I'm normally friends with the Olympic team, sometimes I defeat some of them. I mean, one, and then he defeated 15 times. And you may lose by only one hit, but he always wins. And this is it's something, I mean, it's very different. So that experience, you can only get it in compete, and you will not get any help from a treatise. So this is something that you have to work out yourself through, and then probably somebody can teach you. Yeah, somebody who has lived that. So you need somebody with experience that have been through that, has felt what you're feeling now. So he can help you because it's he has been there. It's just like being a soldier in a way. It's just like reading books or actually being in a battle. Then if you go into battle, you don't know how you will react. Then people who have been there, veterans, they can teach you. So it's the same. So, but that is why, I mean, I will never deny competition. It's where I come from. I don't think it's my stuff here now, but I think it's something that can help people to actually improve as fencers. Also, it is also true that historical fencing competition, my opinion, is not as educational as Olympic sport fencing because of the rules. It's true that I have competed in both worlds, and I was much more nervous when I competed in Olympic sport fencing than in historical fencing because there are so many mistakes with the referees. I have been a referee and I have been a competitor, so I know very well both sides. So, and then when you are as a referee, you make many mistakes because you don't see everything. And then in competitor, very often you're out and you didn't deserve it. And then because the referee made a mistake. So you don't really get nervous because as it's not something that is completely up to you. The responsibility is not as big as the rules are very, very clear and there are no mistakes. So you win, you lose. And so you have taking that responsibility. It's very educational. And I mean, historical fencing is what it is. We can't change that. So and it's not going to have a set of rules completely. So it's what it has. So I still suggest to actually compete, and don't do Olympic fencing. It's too different. But from my experience that comes from, I see that probably I will be too old for them, but probably in time they will. I don't know if it's not the moment, but probably if the rules were completely clear and set for everyone, it would, and the refereeing was clear, probably it would be better in terms of education, because you get more responsible of your actions. But well, that's competition. I didn't want to go in there. I just like it came up. What I was saying, but the thing that, I think that the historical fencing material must be focused on either creating a modern day methods which will not respect completely the descriptions. I mean, not only in Destreza, in any kind of method or tradition or author, because you will adapt it to what you have in your hand, to the way it defends against you, the weapons you are using, your personal skills. It's okay. It's just like, for me, it's okay as long as you fence well. If it's okay. I mean, the important thing is fencing well. When you see people fencing well, it's a pleasure. And when you see people that fence clumsily, it is not. I mean, you can't blame them because everyone has his own practical experience. But the idea is handle properly distance and timing, which is los medios, the medios concept. It is so important that you can make something beautiful or very ugly. So, and this is important because fencing must be beautiful, or we will never convince anyone. I have I still have contact with some of the people of the Olympic fencing team of my time, because one of them lives in the same town, Cantos, where you came actually back. And he told me once, well, sometimes you see people, your staff, I mean, historical fencing, you see people that the fence is so ugly that it's really not appealing. Yeah, just like it's not. The same thing happens in sport fencing. The thing is that in sport fencing, you only, when you go to the finals, you only see the good ones. But that's why I think that, as I say, 3 different approaches, and I think all of them should be experienced, and then trying to get as much as we can from all of them. And but if for what you were asking before about the historical thing, I think it should be made considering, I mean, the context. I mean, don't hit hard. You can hit in the face, you can cut in the face, you can hit hard, and then everything will make more sense. In our particular case, in the Destreza.
So you have created a modern practical method. Can you talk about how that fits inside the family of Destreza? Do you see that as part of the Destreza family, or is it something new?
I mean, you can say it's new Destreza, but Etenhard was new Destreza, and Rada. And I mean, and if you go later on, you will see that in the after Rodríguez del Canto, the method is they call it the French, Italian, Spanish method, and then they have blend why? Because I mean, fencing is like that. So just like if what I mean, the strength is about true or false. So, it's you take the philosophy of Destreza, you put it into your training, and then you create a practical method. Obviously, you can use all descriptions you have, but some of them will never work in a modern day context. So you have to let them go. If you stick to them, it will never work. And it's important that they work because what is only what works is true. Otherwise, there is no if um, if the truth isn't the treatise, then you have to go into the historical context approach. That the one, the third one, in the way I see it and the way I work with it. Because otherwise, if you do it in the modern day method, you will lose. I mean, you can't. It's so easy. I mean, I I remember many years ago. I mean, it was a long time ago, but um, when in Italy, the first I was not doing the strength or anything. I was just trying to fence with a rapier at the time, and I was interested in the strength. And I met Ramon Martinez and some of his students that came there. I mean, and it was so easy. I mean, they were not a match in any way. I mean, just like it was trying, walking with the arm extended. It was not difficult. I mean, they were not probably the best ones, but the thing is that it's easy because it's in terms of timing, they are giving you the length and the time. So for an experienced fencer, it's not difficult to actually get control of the blade, get inside and even know what he's going to do. Why this work in the time of for Pacheco or Rettenhauer or anything? Yeah, because what it was, as I was telling before, it's just because of the context. We we put ourselves in the context and it starts working, and it works. I mean, it's what we do now, and it works. It works well. I mean, you can make it work, but you must put yourself in the context, and the other has to play in the context. If it doesn't work to play in the context, you have to readapt. Because in the end, the important thing is that you get the control of the central line. So often you don't need the control of the blade. You need just the control of the central line. You hit it, it's okay. I mean, it's just like as long as you control the central line, you have it's okay. And you do that with many. You have many possibilities with footwork, movements of the blade, different combinations in time, so the positions of the shoulders. So it's much more complex than something just like, you put the blade in the front and then you bind it. Never gonna work against an experienced fencer. Never. It's like, I remember some years ago, I went to Italy and a friend was fencing with my friend, with Francesco Loda and Isal. Then he, all the Francesco school, mainly all Italians, but mainly Francesco school, actually, they are very good, disengaging. So they are very fast and very precise, and then they have very good timing. So the thing, you can actually do an atajo the way you think. No, because he will hit you immediately. So you have to stay always in the right angle, which is not actually the right angle position. Is the right angle concept, but with the obtuse angle position. Why? Because it's longer distance. You must use the obtuse angle, so the plane of intersection is stronger and safer. So it doesn't make any sense to put both of them straight if you are too far, because there is no plane of intersection. So this is common sense. I mean, just like that's why this is why I approach the stress. I mean, I use the stress to actually put it into the practice and then understand. Just like reasoning with it, it's just like I mean, the practical method will scatter from. So the context is modern day art. So we will adapt to that. When the context is historical, well, then the descriptions will start with competitions. Forget it. All you know, you put it in, and then you concentrate on winning. Adapt to the rules. read the rules well, try to think how it's going to look at how the referee works, and referees adapt to the circumstances. And so, I mean, so you are eventually you are a facet. It's like it's a complete. You can actually handle situations. We don't get into the duel because it's not possible. But I mean, it's all we can do. I don't know. I was not reading the talking. I can read a little bit. I can read a little bit to answer maybe some of the.
So you want to open it up to questions from the audience?
Yeah, well, I see that they're talking about the Marcelli school. Of course, well, Marcelli school, Marcelli actually has the attacco, is the Spanish atajo. Thing is that it's some of the techniques described by Marcelli are directly into destreza, like just like Pallavicini. You see the incatenata in Marcelli is the quarter circle in destreza. So it's so you say, well, the thing is the differences, and I mean there are differences, but everything bends together when you get to the same time, same era. That's why I think also, the historical, the documentary research, the academic research. I think it is also important to understand better what we do. It's just like blending together, because it's something that we're making it up now. Then and every fencer and every teacher, but also every fencer makes it up by himself. So in the end, all the academic part, all the historical part is fascinating, and it's time traveling, but eventually all gets down there in the arena. And then at the moment you must be practical. So I think you may enjoy all the time traveling, but the experience, but when you get it into practical implementations, you need to be practical. Just like I have in the old days, I got ideas from everywhere. I mean, just like Pallavicini, for example, it's a southern Italian treatise. He shows a movimiento de conclusión, just like that. I mean, it's just the same. He performs it. I mean, I normally perform in a different way because I have my reasons not to make people. I don't want people to get hurt when they disarm me. But I never know if I making it better than him because I had never met him. Maybe I'm better than he was. I don't know, or maybe don't. Maybe I will never know. But I don't think of them as something. I mean, fencing. It's an art that develops very quickly when people has practice skills. Human beings learn quickly. They have some already body mechanics training. So it's.
So we have a question in the chat about Destreza authors countering vulgar fencers. Do you find these ideas work for modern practical application?
Yeah, well, actually, if you adapt them, yeah, because the vulgar fencing, the thing is that, as I said, when you read Godinho, all the descriptions, I mean, Pacheco and Cruzado Peralta, Cruzado is just following Pacheco. What they do is actually explain the vulgar techniques to actually say that they are bad. But this is not always true. The thing is that there are social reasons underlying. So just I'm saying something that probably many of you will know, but Pacheco is very smart when he gets when he get to the court in the in this, probably in the 1599, probably he's always traveling, but it's in the early 17th century when he gets to Madrid. And he, and the problem is that the Spanish society was very stratified. So, and it's difficult to understand because you have, if you read all, you see the theater of Lope de Vega, when you read what they say, I mean, the worst thing in the world is being a vulgar. I mean, being from the common men. So, but common men do not want to be common men. So even among them, there is a very strong stratification. So you say that the other is common, but you are not. Even if you are not a gentleman. I mean, you may not be a gentleman, but you pretend to be, and you pretend that others are common men, but you don't. But for the gentleman who is richer than you are a common man. So it is very complex. This fencing is just one of the fields where this battle actually takes place. So Pacheco, as being noble, I mean, not very high nobility, but being noble, Pacheco actually takes advantage of this, and then he's very skillful. He proves in practical terms what Carranza never did, because Carranza never actually fenced. Actually, he would just like develop the method, but never fenced against anyone. It was actually um, people. I mean, the fences in Sevilla pulled Carranza's leg normally. If you consider him, and then he was not very popular, but he just wrote the book and did other things. You know, he went to fight against the pirates in uh, in in Honduras then as a governor, and so he left fencing. Then it was Pacheco who actually brought it into a practical method. That's why he actually developed the method, creating terms that we follow nowadays. So when he gets there, he's skillful and he sees he can do something with that. And so he says, well, what I do is true and what the others are vulgar. The thing is that the vulgars are probably, we never know, but probably the fencing was decaying because the the Spanish society, all the wealth was in the hand of the nobility. So you need to have the nobility as a customer to actually get some incomes because there was no money in the middle class. That was it was disappearing slowly. So many artisans, fencing was a common man activity, not a gentleman activity. Gentlemen trained for war, trained for duels, but did not fence. So what happened is that Pacheco actually, following Carranza, tries to elevate fencing as the art of the sword, saying this is for the gentleman. And I can make my living with this because I'm very skillful and I'm intelligent. I created a method. So when the problem is that among common men, as there is not really much work to do because money is in the hands of the nobility, and nobility starts finding interest in fencing, say, hey, I'm going to become a fencing teacher. So everybody wants to be a fencing teacher. So it's full of very bad fencing teachers. So and all of them try to market themselves to get the nobility as a customer. So they say they invent new things, and then not different from nowadays in a way. So because now we are vulgars, obviously. So the thing is that the level of fencing is lowers, and then it's every time is worse. And at this moment when Pacheco gets there, and he's a good fencer, he's skillful, he can explain it, and then he used geometry and things. He convinces everyone. Everybody is convinced by him. So they want him to become the Master Mayor, but the Master Mayor is for life, and the guy doesn't want to go away. So he stays there and at the end, they will probably, I think, I'm not sure because this is somebody mentioned this, but the, he was sent away and Pacheco was put in place because he was getting older, and the nobility wanted him to actually make to establish Destreza as the unified method, which he did actually. when he did it, he was quarreled in the court. He went to the court because as all the exams were not were not considered valid anymore, so they had to take the exam once again. Probably this was because he needed money, and the monarchy, the king, was not paying him. He could only get money from people doing examinations. So what he did was actually saying, well, the title is not valid anymore. You have to make the exam again, and you have to pay again. He was only way to get incomes. So, and then it's also, I mean, I don't want to make it long, but this is when you go to Carrancistas, actually, they don't want to pay. I mean, they never met Carranza, they never studied with Carranza, but what they took Carranza's book and did what I say, what I was suggesting to do, that we do. I mean, it's just like you take the book and then you develop your method, which is what Mendes de Carmona did. But Mendes de Carmona was, when Pacheco went to Sevilla showing his method, he traveled all over Spain at the beginning. He went to Sevilla and Mendes de Carmona was there. So that's why Pacheco hated Mendes de Carmona, because he said he had copied what he had done, because he didn't make anything original, which is probably true, but we will never know, because it's a very, all these, I mean, all this must be written. It's great fun. I mean, I find it very funny. Just like you see how they were actually human beings, and that's why I was saying before that it's difficult to understand many of the things in the Streta if you don't know all these small details that make, you know, everything was related, because it was a small world. Oh yeah, but I have lost track. Okay, about the
Now, let's see if we have more questions.
no, the thing about the, you know, the one of the most basic actions in I mean, not only the Vulgars, also the Italian, and also nowadays, but it's difficult to put it in place. It's just like it, um, it's you know, when the other lowers, so the most typical action, not vulgar. It's we call it vulgar. I think it's insulting and it's not fair. Just like when you are skillful, the others are afraid of your control of the blade. So this is what happened with my friends in Italy, with Francesco students. Then is that they always put the blade away. So you try to control. This is how I developed the idea of not actually controlling the blade, but controlling the central line. Because you can, if you want the blade, you lose. So you just control the central line. That's atajo virtual. Okay. Then, but you have to put it in place. Normally, you have to learn how to. In that cases, it is shown in some treatises. Ettenhard suggested, but it's not very clearly explained. So it's difficult to find out if you don't have found out before yourself. In Pedro de Sicilia Teruel shows it. Actually, is depicted when he uses the acute angle in the lower line, in la rectitud de abajo, and this will work. But the problem is that you need to put your hand position must be in the proper position. So you need, if the point is sometimes too, I mean, it's difficult because the point and the grip must be coordinated, so you actually are able to get in the central line in time, because you will make an atajo with the violento coming from below. But the thing is that if the point is sideways a little bit more than needed, you will not get in the central line in time. So in this demand also position of the shoulders. So actually this is better that a teacher actually teaches. Somebody who knows actually shows it directly and teaches the student. You can find through practice, obviously, but it needs training, because it's normally your adversary has much more simple action to perform, and it just wants to thrust directly, and then for you it's much more difficult. So you have all the alignments of shoulders, body, weapon, everything is Also, one of the things should be considered that I say in the book, I don't know, probably I don't know if people has realized, but it's very important, is that the diameter is not in the feet, it's in the sword. Then when you understand that, the attack virtual will be easier to perform. Because many often, when those who don't want to be bound actually put the blade sideways. So if you stay, you think the central line is here. No, it's not. It's not in front of you anymore. It's where he has put his sword. So you should focus everything. I mean, your weapon, but not only your weapon, your whole body, by turning the shoulders and the hips. So you focus toward the blade. So you have the whole body, is what they call el todo, the whole contra la parte. So you have to use el todo, which el todo, it means your whole body, shoulders, weapon, everything with good mechanics. This obviously needs. It's true that a small mistake in the grip or in the shoulder will make difficult to actually perform it perfectly. So it comes to experience. It has to be found to practice. But I found this and actually, once you understand it, well, you can perfectly overcome anyone trying to avoid the blade, because it will be now a matter of how good he is and how good are you. But the method will work. The thing is that how you put it in place, obviously. If it's and the and there are many possibilities, obviously, here. It's just like something we should see with a sword in hand, many possibilities. But the atajo virtual, I think it's very important nowadays, because we in the modern, I mean, we go into historical context, it's different. The atajo virtual, you will use it, but it has less importance. But in the modern days, I think it's even more important than in the past. Or in the past, it was against the vulgars. I mean, people who fence without assuming, getting in the mean of proportion and fencing in the gentleman manner. But but it's very important, because we fence very long distances. So normally a lot of people trying to do destreza has problems getting into distance. Yeah, mainly if the other doesn't want you to get into distance, it's very difficult. You will never be able to step into the mean of proportions. You will go directly from the long distance through a short one. That's why actually I developed one more concept. The idea of operational distance that I use. I call it different way. I call it I don't remember now. Just like in Spanish is because we always at the beginning, when I was teaching, we were always there. I mean, we were never in the mean of proportion, never, because we all felt it was too close. At the time, I still hadn't go through the contest that much, but I felt that it was not safe. So he said, well, no. So I needed another. So that's why we use, the mean of proportion, longer distance for the mean of proportion, then proportional mean and proportionate mean. Then it's just like, but anyway, just like in the German school, the German longsword school uses also basically the same concept, explained in a different way, and the Italian, well. So the thing is about the mean of proportion is a very useful concept to know where you are. But for at least for a modern method, you don't need to step in that mean. Actually, often is a mistake, because distance, you must understand distance. It's not, you can't actually force yourself to do something which doesn't make sense. It must make sense. So you 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 are always. I mean, it's not only about succeeding. It's also that the whole. I mean, both fencers as a whole, when they fence, you see that there is a dialogue, and then and there is beauty of movement. And sometimes if you are good fencers, you can put order in chaos. Fencing is chaos, so you can put order because you handle properly distance and the extension of the arm. Also, one of the important thing one of the things that I think is very important is the extension of the arm. Is the way you control the central line. Obviously, the movement of of the body, the hips, the legs, the knees, will help to handle distance. Distance is actually controlled by all possibilities you have in your body. So you can actually leaning forward, get the mean of proportion without moving the legs. And you're extending your body forward, just like in the Italian treatises. But it's sometimes you must do that because the way the way the action, I mean the way the other fences does not allow you to actually bind exactly going with a straight line, not in our context. So that is as I was saying at the beginning. I suggest the contrary of being dogmatic. No, just use martial common sense in terms of fencing, and use the Destreza to explain it. We will make changes. Yeah, there will be changes for sure, but it is unavoidable. This is what they did actually. I mean, just like I think those of us actually teaching nowadays are just like modern day Ettenhard, or I mean, we are not nobles, unfortunately. We are vulgars, but it's different world. I mean, but also it's nothing new, but because this happened in the 17th century, meaning in Spain, after when Pacheco established the method, all the vulgars became diestros. I mean, not all, but many of them became diestros. So everybody was doing destreza, and they fenced their own way. It's just like in Vietnam is a proof of that. But there are others. So you say, well, but what the hell? Yeah, because they were using destreza to explain their practical method, which probably was not the same. No, for sure was not the same as Pacheco. They never met him. I mean, at the time they never met. So okay, probably you can read some question.
Oh, I think everyone's really fascinated by what you're saying. Let's see if we can get some more questions in the chat.
Out of range, yeah, the out of range, yeah, right. Yeah, no, the this and this one that wrote it in the chat. I mean, the out of range mean is just like is the concept below. I mean, I didn't do it with any kind of pretension of fame or anything. It's just because I needed to teach. It's just like when I teach. I mean, I don't know the context in which Pacheco or the other masters taught. They were nobles. It's different. I mean, but I normally have to teach a lot of people at the same time. So my context is different from a guy in the 17th century. So I need to adapt sometimes the terms to actually make it easier to speak when I have to teach 25 people at the same time, which is the only way you can make your living nowadays.
In Spanish, what is the word you use for the out-of-range medio?
I use the distancia operativa.
Thank you.
I
So
can
we have a
write that.
question. Do you have recommendations for reading about historical context, anything in English?
The books, I mean, book. You mean, I mean, if I have recommendations on. Okay. I mean, your wife told me once. I mean, about the book who is about violence in the golden century in Spain, maybe. Because
Yes.
yeah, that is taken from a Spanish book actually, which is, and it's interesting to understand violence in the time. There's also probably reading reading some. I mean, not all of them. There are too many, but some of Lope de Vega's theater, plays, because it's the 16th century theater has a lot of contact with fencing, so it's and often some of the things shown there can be helpful to understand. uh, what are, the problem is that many things are not easily are not translated. So I normally found them in Spanish. Now I'm reading. I'm now I'm reading about Pacheco's life because I want to write something about. I mean, what I have was telling is just a small part of what I've been researching, but the character likes me. I mean, I like the character because he changed everything. And he was a badass, actually. So just like so, but mainly because I've always felt that everything started with him. So that's why I wrote the article on Quevedo, because Quevedo has been, but Quevedo didn't like fencing. He never fenced. Actually, he didn't never hold a sword in his hand. Just like he so, and all these things happen in Spain. And in Spain, a lot of people think that Quevedo is something just like patriotic. So I'm taking just like anti-patriotic because I'm saying that. Say no. The thing is that I'm trying to defend the Spanish method, and then and all the after him, all the rest of masters and characters should be studied. I think it's a very something fascinating in terms of not this is not something that has to do with practical implementation, but more about studying the world and the characters of those years. And as and as Pacheco's actually in the Canary Islands when Drake actually attacked, and he was one of the officers in charge of the defense. It's one of the things I'm trying to research now. His military, uh, his military life during the 10 years he spent in the Canary Islands. You know, I think he basically then doing the most exceptional thing was fighting Drake. But Drake is a famous pirate. So it's something normal fencing masters normally are not soldiers in war. So I find this appealing. That's why what some okay.
So we have a question in the chat I could give you.
Yeah.
What is let's say that you want to apply Destreza thinking to a modern fight as you face your opponent. What should you be thinking about? I think you've been talking about that in a large respect over this discussion, but can we drill down on that piece?
To approach you mean the Andrew's question about the way to attack? You mean how does use the strategy? No.
Yeah, strategy and tactics from the Diestro's perspective in a modern fight.
Yeah, well, one of the things of the circling idea, actually, it's I think it's misunderstood. And the thing is that again, we go into the context. You circle more. Why? Because the blades get in contact. I mean, you can all. This is common sense applied. I mean, you take the geometry, put it into practical experience, in the practical implementation. Okay, if you are not in the mean of proportion, if you circle around, it's a crazy thing to do, because if you circle around me and I'm staying in the center of the circle, it's just. I mean, when you fence, you put yourself in a in a in a position geometrically. So I normally see myself in the center. So it's you turning around. So it will take less time for me to actually aiming at you, that you circling around, aiming at me. But this is not something that cannot be argued, because in the perimeter of the circle, your movement will always be longer than me in the center of the circle. So this is a secondary problem, that while you move, your movement is so big that you may easily lose your body position, your guard. So it's easy for me to counterattack, which is what normally happens when people, naively try to turn around when there's no reason for it. So you need the bind. So when you bind the blade, you can move. Then you can do it in long distance. You can do it through the right side, which is línea en cruz, and the general destrechar and flaquezas. Normally, we use more línea en cruz because as we normally are very long distance, there's no way to use general destrechar because it will never use the right angle position. So because you are too far, and we all feel it's not safe, so you will use more línea en cruz. Okay, but you still have to be close. The moment you are a bit far, you first you have to get closer, and then if you reach the minor proportion or shorter distance, you can actually go sideways with the blade, which means that you will not make normally more than one step or two. The second one, get it into the proportionate mean if you are able to do it, or if the other steps away, then probably you will step back. You will step in the proportional mean because distance is longer, and then step back again. So it's again going inside and out. What is the problem is that this works, as I said, more in the historical context. In the modern art, the problem is that the other can do whatever he wants. I mean, you can't force him to do what he doesn't want. So if you get closer and he retreats, you're still very far. So if you close distance, you bind, and he steps away with a small angle and then goes inside again, you can actually keep on circling. You need to circle, you need to bind the blade to expel the way, to beat it away, or bind it in a way, or you can actually move. So it's not like that much circling. You must, it's about more the angles. It's about more getting into the angles. I mean, what I call the open gaps. I mean, it's ángulo de capacidad ocupable in Spanish, which is, but there are only two things. I mean, you think about it. Yeah, there are only two things you can put in the ángulo de capacidad, in the open gap. It's either your sword, either your body. So if when you put your sword, well, you have control the blade, or his blade is so far away that he can hit you. Otherwise, it's dangerous. Because if you hit him in the angle, but he's in front of you, it's a double hit. So normally, if the other possibility that you bind, or through movements, deflecting, I mean, not only binding, can be both diversion, deflecting, spelling, whatever, or through mistakes of mistakes in the handling of the sword. Because, as I said before, one of the most important things I say in this small book, which is say it's not doesn't have any pretension, but the important thing is that the diameter is where the sword is. So if your handle, you don't handle properly the sword, you will send the diameter, you don't know where. And then the diameter is the movement of the sword puts the diameter in a place in every set moment, in every single moment. So if you put it, if you have good timing and distance, and your adversary has poor handling, well, you force him to move the blade away somewhat, and then when he's away and the gap is open enough, so you get inside, sometimes with atajo virtual, sometimes direct thrust, depending on distance. Sometimes you just get closer so he comes back and you bind again. So, but you start using his movement and his problems in handling the diameter to actually create your own race of arms, your advantage. And I think this is the most important thing, that the handling of the weapon will directly affect your diameter. So it will directly affect your geometry, will directly affect everything, the angles, the open gaps, everything. So now we get back to practical implementation. So you have to handle properly the sword. It's about that. It's about you handle properly the sword, you have to coordinate your hips, might help the movement of the shoulders, so you extend the arm properly in the right distance, in the right time. So I always say that good fencers have always, the extend the arm always in the right moment. So when you're going to do something, he has put your sword in the middle. But when you think you can bind him, he has moved away, so you don't find his blade. what the hell is doing this guy? Well, he knows how to move, so where he has to put the sword, the speed of the position of the elbow, the speed of the arm, the grip he's using, so the edges are perfectly aligned each time. This is something that is not explained in the book, not in my book, in any book. I mean, Destreza doesn't explain that because it leaves this part in the art. But it's very important because in the end, it's obvious that Pacheco knew very well how to do these things. Otherwise, he would never been who he was. All great fencers know these things, but these are details. So to teach them, you need to teach them that somebody has to teach you this. You can find, yeah, but obviously, but some will find more, some less, depending on how skillful they are. But I know this is the limitations. Everyone has his own limits. We have to make the best of what we have, obviously. And that's why I'm always open to learn from anyone who I see that has good mechanical skills. Now, I don't care about the tradition. I will put it into the Streza concept or theory afterwards. But if he has something, I mean, the knowledge is in the body, it's there. Then you can make Streza pencil.
So I think we have time for one more question, and I'm going to take this one. So some authors in Destreza don't like feints. Can you talk about feints?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, this is, the author says, and the problem is here is, well, what kind of sword he was using is the first thing. I mean, as I said before, I like heavier rapiers. So I try to handle them as fast but normally when you want to feint with a heavier rapier, you need to charge it. I mean, you can't extend the arm and feint because it's too slow, even for somebody with a lot of experience. But so what do? Well, you just keep on moving. You move so that you throw the sword and then you are able to feint. But still, this is very difficult. But still, you can make it. But it's very difficult. But there are so many questions. I mean, before giving an answer, I will make many questions. Say, well, how skillful is my opponent? Because the moment when in this book is not the next one, I will explain a little bit more the grips. I mean, modern day weapons. As I said, we don't know how were the grips, the fencing weapons. I don't know how they were. We know how they were the sharps. Okay, you look at Spanish sharps of the 17th century, and normally they have a relatively short handle. In the late 17th century, the pommel is very small. This is to make the handling easier because normally the weight is displaced towards the point to make cuts more powerful. So feinting is not that easy unless you charge the blade. Okay, let's do that also with our weapons. Assuming you have a heavy blade. Okay, so you can do it this way, but also depends on how good is the other one, because the moment you feint, normally you have to use the internal grip. And the internal grip is relatively weak. So it can only be used when you have gone farther, I mean, much farther than the mean of proportion. So he can actually hit your blade. It's very dangerous to do it when he can hit your blade. You should immediately change the grip and use the edge to protect the possibility of getting hit in the blade. So difficult. So I agree with the authors in this case. But if I have a lighter blade, well, then no, because with a lighter blade, even if he hit my blade, it's very difficult that he pulls it away because it's very light. So you have if you use a triplet, for example, a Zen Warrior blade, which is relatively long, you can perfectly feint. Actually, you should feint more because the blade is too long for a Destreza rapier. So, but anyway, you don't know. Somebody may have used it because you go to museums and you see everything. I mean, on sharps, said so. But longer blades, it's not about the author, it's about the blade. It's about longer blades would favor actually feinting and disengaging, and shorter, heavier blades would actually more the controlling the right angle, atajo style. But this is always very relative. Obviously, with short blades, and when I use short blades with a heavy blade, when I fence with my students, and some of them are good fencers with longer blades, I normally never use feints. I mean, I don't like the idea of feint anyway, because feint is not in the destreza mentality. We use the idea of acometimiento, which is, I could translate it just like, because the feint is about feinting. I mean, you do an action to create a reaction and then use it. It's a second tension play. But, and this you use it in sport. Yeah, because you want to win. You can see how he moves and use it to win. But normally, philosophically, I mean, in terms of philosophy, you should do acometimiento, which is you attack and you don't know what you're going to do. I mean, it's not an attack, actually. It's just extending the arm to control the central line. And then if he tries to bind, you disengage. If it doesn't bind, you keep on going. And then if it doesn't do anything, you have more degrees, you bind. If it binds, you can disengage, you make a sitting parry. And then so you don't know, you just go through it, and then you decide later. That's why you should bring your whole body in perfect balance, so you can react. One of the things I normally say, I mean, it is not the it is fencing. It's just like, if when you attack, you get any kind of parry, atajo, deflection, any kind of action, and you are not able to solve the problem, you will not attack, because you are afraid, because you don't trust yourself. So, I mean, you have to understand that will happen during the assault, will happen things that you can control, and you still train to react to them. So this is very basic. It's very basic training. It's about displacing the weight in the hips and the shoulders, how your muscles actually should handle your hips, and then your shoulders should move coordinatedly with the elbow and the wrist and the grip. So everything is in position. And then you start having self-confidence, to be self-confident to actually react. And then you start doing more things. I know I don't want to seem that fencing is complicated. That is why it's beautiful. Just, killing somebody, it's easy. It's dual, it's easy. But fencing, splitting into things that you can teach to others, and then try to understand, it's complicated, but it's fascinating as well. Can take your whole life studying and practice.
Yeah. I'm glad I asked this question on feints, because I liked where you went with your answer. So I think that's all our time,
Okay.
and I want to thank you so much for coming and speaking with us tonight. It's been really great to hear your perspective. And I love the way that you work through Destreza theory in a very practical way. I think that's fascinating. And you really are a resource for some of the stories and the history of the tradition. That's really interesting.
Well, I think probably one of the things is that sometimes it would be wonderful to be able to translate it immediately, just talking. So the thing we read, because some of the things are found in old books. Now I'm reading Historia del Nuevo Mundo. Internet now is fascinating. I mean, you can find things in internet, but they are the old treatise written in the old Spanish. So I know it's very difficult to get and this would need to be translated actually to make it accessible to other people, and it will be the 16th and 17th century Spanish history is fascinating, because it was in the time just like United States is nowadays, and Pacheco was just like the master of Trump. Well, I don't know, of Obama, whatever president of the United States, just like, but he was, a soldier of the empire. So it's what is around, everything is around that. It's so the understanding the story of Spain and the history of Spain and what they thought because of what they were. It was a different world, obviously, but the way nobles understood life, the common man, everything. It's very interesting because it's my country, and it's. I mean, but we are very different people now. It's just like many things have. But if you read, you can understand emotionally. I mean, and then fencing is something emotional, and so getting all this history into yourself to it's actually. I don't know how it's about feelings. So when I fence, I said it's practical things. You concentrate on geometry and then but as I said, we are modern day Edenhards, modern day Rodriguez del Canto, modern day teachers. They were modern day at the time. Now, in my opinion, it's the time that we create our own traditions. Doing what they did is interesting for the academic research, but it's not as appealing to me as well. I mean, to me, um, for nowadays, I prefer to. I mean, I feel just like I'm somebody who comes after them. I mean, I'm not trying to do what they did. I'm trying to understand what they did to have knowledge, because I think I do have knowledge because I teach, and as much as I can to. But in the end, I do what they did. Is create my own method and try to do it honestly and humbly, and teach others to fence as well as they can. If I can produce good teachers, well, it means that I did a good job.
Yeah, I think you've tested like 5 masters right now, and it's nice. Every time I see you hold an examination, I'm always happy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that's all of our time. Next week we will have Phil Swift speaking to us about RADA. And thank you again, Alberto, very much
Oh,
for
that's
sharing
fantastic.
everything.
Okay, okay.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks to you, and thanks to all. I mean, to all of you who came to listen to what I have to say. Thank you very much to you all.